Imagine a world beyond our own, where heavenly beings dwell, serving a divine and mysterious purpose. In this universe of spirituality and mystery, there is an order of angels who stand out for their closeness to God Himself, the Seraphim. Today, we're going to explore the fascinating relationship between God and the Seraphim, revealing secrets and curiosities that will expand your understanding of these heavenly beings. The Seraphim are more than just messengers or guardians of divinity. They represent the essence of devotion, spiritual purification, and an ardent passion for divine service. Their wings, which cover their faces and feet, symbolize reverence and humility before God, while the other two wings, used for flying, represent their readiness to carry out divine designs. These angelic beings occupy a special place in the celestial hierarchy, being closest to the light and the divine presence. Their function goes beyond simple worship. They are the messengers who transmit God's wishes and will to human beings, guiding them on their spiritual journey. Throughout this video, we will delve into the depths of this relationship between God and the Seraphim, unraveling mysteries and revealing curiosities that are sure to arouse your curiosity and admiration. Get ready for an exciting journey through the celestial world, where devotion and passion merge into a single, sublime existence. The Seraphim are like the musicians of a celestial orchestra, always in tune to sing the most sublime praises to God. One imagines that their voices, pure and melodious, reverberate through the heavens, filling the atmosphere with an aura of adoration and reverence. They not only sing, but also proclaim God's holiness and power, as if each word were a note in a divine symphony. These angelic beings are portrayed as dedicated servants whose sole purpose is worship and service to God. Their devotion is so intense that they are always on standby, never resting in their mission to praise and exalt the Creator. This constant expression of worship is not only an act of obedience, but also a manifestation of the deep love and reverence that the Seraphim have for God. Watching this heavenly scene, we are invited to reflect on our own devotion and worship of God. Do we devote enough time to praising and exalting the Lord's name in our daily lives? Is our worship as fervent as that of the Seraphim? These questions lead us to seek greater intimacy with God and to cultivate a deeper devotion in our lives. The Seraphim inspire us to raise our hearts in worship, not just with words, but with our whole lives. They remind us that true worship goes beyond rituals and ceremonies. It is an expression of our love and reverence for God, which should permeate every aspect of our lives. May we learn from the Seraphim to be dedicated servants and passionate worshippers, always ready to proclaim the holiness and power of our God. The Seraphim are like divine messengers, bearers of God's words and designs. Not only do they transmit messages, but they are also the intermediaries between heaven and earth, bringing with them the presence and will of the Creator. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Seraphim are seen as the heralds of divine revelations, communicating with the prophets and transmitting messages of guidance, consolation, and warning to God's people. These heavenly messengers are represented as beings of light, whose presence radiates wisdom and power. Their communication with humans is described as being direct and clear, with no room for misinterpretation. They are bearers of divine truth, transmitting it in such a way as to inspire and transform those who receive it. When we contemplate the image of the Seraphim as God's messengers, we are led to reflect on the importance of communication in our lives. Just as the Seraphim are diligent in transmitting divine messages, we must also be diligent in communicating God's truth and love to the world around us. The life of the Seraphim challenges us to be messengers of hope, peace, and reconciliation in a world that is often plunged into darkness and chaos. By learning from the Seraphim about the importance of communication, we are inspired to seek a deeper communion with God and to share the good news of the gospel with boldness and confidence. May we be like the Seraphim, messengers of light in a world that so desperately needs God's truth and love. The Seraphim are like living flames that burn in the hearts of those who seek God, bringing with them the promise of purification and transformation. Their presence is like a purifying fire that burns away impurities and sins, preparing hearts for a more intimate encounter with the Creator. It is believed that the mere proximity of the Seraphim can bring a sense of spiritual cleansing and renewal, allowing individuals to feel closer to God and more receptive to His transforming grace. The image of the Seraphim as agents of purification and transformation reminds us that the spiritual journey is a continuous process of growth and renewal. Just as fire purifies metal, removing its impurities and shaping it into something new, the Seraphim work on our hearts, cleansing us of our sins and imperfections, so that we can become more like God in our nature and character. This idea of purification and transformation is central to Christian theology, which teaches that God's grace can transform us from the inside out, making us new creatures in Christ Jesus. The Seraphim are seen as part of this divine process of renewal, guiding us on our spiritual journey and helping us to grow in holiness and closeness to God. As we contemplate the purifying action of the seraphim, we are invited to examine our own lives and ask ourselves if we are allowing God to work in us in a similar way. Are we open to His transforming grace, allowing Him to remove everything that distances us from Him and molding us into His image and likeness? May we be open to the purification and transformation that the seraphim represent, allowing God to do His marvelous work of renewal and restoration in us. The seraphim are like sentinels of God's holiness, keeping constant vigil to protect it from any form of profanation or impurity. Their presence is like a protective shield around divine holiness, ensuring that nothing and no one can profane or corrupt the purity and holiness of the Creator. It is believed that the seraphim are always on the lookout for threats to God's holiness, ready to intervene and defend His glory and majesty. This image of the seraphim as guardians of holiness invites us to reflect on the importance of holiness in our own lives. Just as the seraphim protect God's holiness, we are also called to protect and preserve holiness in our own lives, keeping ourselves separate from sin and impurity and living according to the high standards set by God. The idea of the seraphim being guardians of holiness also reminds us that holiness is not only a characteristic of God, but also a calling for all His followers. We are called to be holy, just as God is holy, and this holiness must be reflected in our daily lives, in our thoughts, words, and actions. As we contemplate the seraphim's role as guardians of holiness, we are challenged to examine our own lives and ask ourselves if we are living according to the standards of holiness set by God. Are we protecting and preserving holiness in our lives, or are we allowing sin and impurity to enter and contaminate our relationship with God? May we be inspired by the vigilance and dedication of the seraphim, seeking to live holy lives dedicated to God at all times. The seraphim are like a living example of unconditional devotion and service to God, inspiring human beings to dedicate themselves more deeply to their faith. Their devotion is so complete and fervent that it serves as a model for all those who seek a more intimate relationship with the Creator. They show us that true devotion is not just a matter of words, but of actions and attitudes that reflect a heart totally surrendered to God. The image of the seraphim as models of devotion challenges us to examine our own lives and ask ourselves if we are truly devoted to God in all areas of our lives. Are we putting God first in our hearts and lives, or are we allowing other things to take the place that He alone should have? The seraphim remind us that true devotion requires sacrifice and commitment, and that we must be willing to offer everything to God in love and worship. In addition, the seraphim's devotion also challenges us to serve God and others with humility and love. They are examples of how service to God should not be done out of obligation, but out of love and gratitude for what He has done for us. They remind us that service to God should not be seen as a burden, but as an opportunity to demonstrate our love for Him and for those around us. As we contemplate the devotion of the seraphim, we are invited to renew our commitment to God and to seek a deeper relationship with Him. May we be inspired by the devotion of the seraphim and seek to live lives that honor God in everything we do. May we be true models of devotion and unconditional service to God, following the example of the seraphim on our journey of faith. The seraphim are like living symbols of purity and the divine fire that burns in their hearts. Their image, with their wings covering their faces and feet, is seen as a symbol of reverence and humility before God's majestic presence. This posture reflects an awareness of God's holiness and the need to approach Him with respect and reverence. The seraphim's wings also have a deep symbolic meaning. While the wings that cover the face and feet represent reverence and humility, the wings used to fly symbolize the readiness and speed with which the seraphim respond to God's call. This image reminds us that we must be ready and willing to obey God's call in our lives, flying towards His will with the same speed and determination as the seraphim. As we contemplate this image of the seraphim, we are challenged to reflect on our own posture before God. Are we truly aware of God's holiness and majesty, and do we approach Him with the appropriate reverence and humility? Are we ready and willing to obey His call in our lives, flying towards His will with readiness and determination? The seraphim remind us that the spiritual life is not just about knowing God intellectually, but also about experiencing His presence in a profound and transforming way. May we be inspired by the purity and readiness of the seraphim, seeking to approach God with reverence and humility, and responding to His call with readiness and determination. The seraphim are like divine muses who have inspired artists, poets and musicians throughout history. Their image, with its shining wings and radiant faces, is an inexhaustible source of inspiration for those who seek to capture the beauty and majesty of the divine in their works of art. From ancient times to the present day, the seraphim have often been represented in paintings, sculptures, poems, songs and literary works, making them a recurring theme in culture and art. The presence of the seraphim in art and culture is a reflection of the fascination and enchantment that these celestial beings exert on humanity. Their image is often associated with the idea of purity, beauty, and perfection, becoming a symbol of aspiration and inspiration for many artists over the centuries. In addition, the seraphim are also seen as messengers of God, transmitting his messages to prophets and humans, which adds a spiritual and transcendent dimension to their artistic representation. When we contemplate the presence of the seraphim in art and culture, we are invited to reflect on the influence these celestial beings have on our own creativity and imagination. Just as artists, poets, and musicians throughout history have been inspired by the seraphim in their work, we are also challenged to seek divine inspiration in our own lives and to express our faith and devotion in creative and meaningful ways. The seraphim remind us that art and culture have the power to connect us with the divine and inspire us to seek beauty and truth in all things. May we be inspired by the creativity and devotion of the seraphim, seeking to express our faith and devotion in ways that inspire and build up those around us. Throughout history, the understanding of the seraphim and their relationship with God has undergone various transformations, reflecting changes in theology and in the understanding of divine nature. In the beginning, the seraphim were seen primarily as celestial beings who praised and worshipped God, proclaiming his holiness and power. Their image was that of angelic creatures of fire, enveloped in burning flames, symbolizing their closeness to divinity and their pure and glorious nature. Over time, the conception of the seraphim expanded to include other characteristics and functions. They came to be seen not only as beings of worship, but also as messengers of God, transmitting his messages to prophets and humans. This new dimension of the seraphim placed them in a more active and intervening role in human history, showing their importance as agents of divine will. In addition, the understanding of the seraphim as guardians of God's holiness also developed over time. They came to be seen as protectors of divinity, guarding God's holiness against any form of profanation or impurity. This view of the seraphim as guardians of divine holiness reinforces their elevated position in the angelic hierarchy and their importance in preserving God's purity and holiness. The evolution of theology has also influenced the understanding of the seraphim as models of devotion and unconditional service to God. They came to be seen as examples for humans to follow, inspiring them to dedicate themselves more deeply to their faith and to serve God with devotion and love. The seraphim occupy a prominent position in the angelic hierarchy, being considered one of the highest orders among celestial beings. This elevated position reflects not only their closeness to God, but also their importance in the divine plan of creation. The seraphim are seen as the guardians of God's throne, maintaining order and harmony in the divine presence and serving as messengers and agents of God's will. The angelic hierarchy is a complex and fascinating concept that helps us understand the diversity of God's creation and the many ways in which God reveals himself to the world. The angelic hierarchy is often represented as an order of heavenly beings, each with their own function and purpose within the divine plan. The seraphim occupy a prominent place in this hierarchy, being seen as beings of light and fire who radiate the glory and majesty of God. When we contemplate the angelic hierarchy and the position of the seraphim within it, we are invited to reflect on the complexity and diversity of divine creation. Just as the seraphim occupy a unique position in the angelic hierarchy, each of us also has a special place and role to play in God's divine plan. We are called to recognize and value the diversity of God's creation, celebrating the many ways in which God reveals himself to the world. The seraphim remind us that God's creation is vast and diverse, and that each being, whether human or angelic, has an important role to play in God's plan. May we be inspired by the angelic hierarchy and the seraphim's position as guardians of God's throne, seeking to live our lives according to God's will and purpose. May we recognize and value the diversity of God's creation, celebrating the many ways in which God reveals himself to the world. The seraphim are celestial beings who fascinate and inspire us with their closeness to God and their dedication to divine service. Throughout this video, we explore the relationship between God and the seraphim, unraveling mysteries and revealing curiosities that broaden our understanding of these angelic beings. From their representation as God's messengers to their position in the angelic hierarchy, the seraphim are an inexhaustible source of inspiration and admiration. Their devotion, purity, and readiness to serve God are an example to us all, challenging us to seek a deeper and more meaningful relationship with the Creator. Contemplating the image of the seraphim leads us to reflect on our own spirituality and devotion. We are inspired to devote more time to worshiping and praising God, to seek spiritual purification and transformation in our lives, and to protect holiness in our hearts and actions. The seraphim also challenge us to be more creative and expressive in our devotion to God, inspiring us to seek artistic and cultural ways of honoring the divine in our daily lives. Their presence in art and culture throughout history is a powerful reminder of the impact that spirituality can have on all areas of our lives. Ultimately, the Seraphim invite us to live lives that reflect the beauty, purity, and devotion they represent. May we be inspired by their example and seek to live lives that glorify God in everything we do. May we become, like the Seraphim, messengers of light, truth, and God's love in this world that so desperately needs these virtues. Thank you for watching this fascinating video about the relationship between God and the Seraphim. We hope you were inspired and captivated by these heavenly beings and their dedication to divine service. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Leave your like, your comment on the subject, and share it with your friends and family so that more people can learn about this incredible topic. We now have a new feature on the channel, the Thanks a Lot button, where you can support and help the channel with any amount. We'd be delighted with your support. Soon, we'll also have a members group on the channel, with exclusive and interesting videos for those who become members. Stay tuned, as we'll soon be announcing how to join this special group. Don't forget to stay on the channel by watching the videos that appear at the top of the screen, as we have lots more interesting content waiting for you. Thank you for watching to the end, and we hope to see you in our next videos.